5 years ago, I couldn't hold a cup of coffee without spilling it everywhere. My hands trembled constantly, and walking across a room felt like navigating an obstacle course. The simplest movements, things most people never think twice about, had become my daily mountains to climb. I'd been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 2 years earlier, and despite medication, my symptoms were progressing faster than I could adapt. But today, I just finished a mile-long walk in my neighborhood. Yesterday, I played catch with my grandson. And right now, I'm holding this microphone steady enough to record this video without assistance. What changed wasn't a miracle drug or expensive treatment. It was discovering a set of movement techniques that actually work. Techniques I wish someone had shown me the day I was diagnosed. When I first started experiencing symptoms, I thought I just needed to try harder. Push through it. Force my body to cooperate. But that approach made everything worse. What I didn't understand then was that Parkinson's affects the basal ganglia, the part of our brain responsible for automatic movements. Things like walking, blinking, swinging your arms, all those movements you never had to think about before. The disease reduces dopamine production, which is crucial for smooth, coordinated movement. So when I was trying to force my body to move normally, I was fighting against my own neurology. The first breakthrough came when my physical therapist explained that I needed to switch pathways. Instead of relying on automatic movement, I needed to use the thinking part of my brain, the frontal cortex, to plan and execute movements deliberately. This shift in understanding changed everything for me. It wasn't about trying harder, it was about trying differently. Let me tell you about the morning I realized things could get better. I was struggling to get out of bed. That moment when you swing your legs over and stand up had become a 10-minute ordeal. My therapist had suggested I try something called movement visualization the day before. So I closed my eyes and mentally rehearsed each step, shifting my weight, moving my legs, placing my feet on the floor, leaning forward, pushing up. When I opened my eyes and actually performed these movements while counting them out loud, I stood up in one fluid motion for the first time in months. I nearly cried. Such a simple thing, standing up, but I'd done it without freezing or wobbling. The technique is called cognitive cueing, and it works because it bypasses those damaged automatic pathways and activates the thinking part of your brain. By consciously planning each movement and using verbal cues, like counting or saying step, 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 you create new neural connections. I started applying this to everything, walking through doorways, turning around, reaching for objects, breaking movements down into smaller parts and narrating them either out loud or in my head. It wasn't an overnight fix, but within weeks, activities that had become nearly impossible were manageable again. One of the strangest symptoms of Parkinson's is called freezing of gait. You're walking along fine, and suddenly your feet feel glued to the floor. It often happens at doorways or when turning corners, transitions that require your brain to recalibrate movement. I used to get stuck multiple times a day, sometimes in public places, which was both frightening and embarrassing. Then I discovered rhythmic cueing. The first time I tried it was in my kitchen. I was frozen in place, unable to move forward. My neurologist had mentioned that external rhythm could help, so I started humming a steady beat. And then I moved. Just a small step, but it broke the freeze. I experimented with different rhythmic tools after that. Counting steadily, 1, 2, 1, 2, listening to marching music while walking. Using a metronome app on my phone. The science behind this is fascinating. Rhythm processing happens in different brain regions than movement control. By synchronizing your steps to a beat, you're essentially creating a workaround for the damaged movement pathways. Now I have rhythm strategies for different situations. When I'm at home, I'll often play music with a strong beat. In public, I have a metronome app that I can listen to through one earbud. And when all else fails, I tap my finger against my leg to create my own rhythm. These techniques reduced my freezing episodes by about 70% within a month of consistent practice. Here's something counterintuitive I learned. When your movements are getting smaller and more rigid, the solution is to deliberately make them bigger. Parkinson's causes something called micrographia. Your handwriting gets tiny, but this shrinking happens with all movements. Your steps get shorter, your arm swing diminishes, even your facial expressions become more limited. I noticed my handwriting had become nearly illegible. My neurologist referred me to a LSVT BIG program, a therapy specifically designed to recalibrate movement perception in people with Parkinson's. The first session felt ridiculous. The therapist had me taking these enormous exaggerated steps and swinging my arms like I was conducting an orchestra. I felt self-conscious and silly. "This feels excessive," I told her. "What feels excessive to you right now is actually normal movement," she explained. "Your perception of movement has changed. Your brain thinks you're moving normally when you're barely moving at all." That was a profound moment for me. My brain was lying to me about how much I was moving. The therapy involved practicing big, exaggerated movements daily. Big steps, big arm swings, big gestures. It felt absurd at first, but over time, my brain began recalibrating. Now when I walk, I consciously think big steps. When I reach for something, I think big reach. What once felt exaggerated now feels normal, and my actual movements look normal to others. Within 2 months of daily practice, my walking stride had increased by nearly 50%, and people stopped asking if I was in pain because my facial expressions returned. One of the most frustrating aspects of Parkinson's is how it affects multitasking. Before my diagnosis, I could walk and talk, carry groceries while navigating stairs, or cook dinner while chatting with my family. As the disease progressed, doing more than one thing at a time became increasingly difficult. If I was walking and someone asked me a question, I'd literally have to stop walking to answer. My movement specialist introduced me to dual task training, deliberately practicing 2 activities simultaneously, starting with simple combinations and gradually increasing difficulty. I began with walking while counting backward from 100. It was surprisingly challenging. Then walking while naming animals or while bouncing a ball. Each session became slightly more complex. The theory is that this type of practice strengthens the frontal lobe's ability to manage multiple tasks, creating cognitive reserve that helps compensate for the basal ganglia's dysfunction. I practiced for just 15 minutes a day, and after about 3 weeks, I noticed I could maintain a conversation during my morning walk without my gait deteriorating. 6 weeks in, I successfully carried a cup of tea from the kitchen to the living room without spilling it, a small victory that felt enormous. Now I incorporate dual tasking into everyday activities. I'll practice my speech exercises while cooking or do hand exercises while watching TV. It's become second nature. Sometimes the simplest changes make the biggest difference. After months of struggling with movement, I discovered that modifying my environment could dramatically reduce my symptoms. My physical therapist suggested placing colored tape on the floor in areas where I typically froze: doorways, tight spaces, turns. These visual cues gave my brain a target to aim for. I put blue tape lines on my kitchen floor and practiced stepping over them. For some neurological reason, having a visual target helps overcome freezing. When my foot would approach the tape, my brain would think step over instead of just walk, engaging different neural pathways. I also discovered that furniture arrangement matters enormously. Creating wider pathways through rooms, removing obstacles, and ensuring I had sturdy objects to hold onto strategically placed around my home made movement much easier. One particularly effective trick was placing horizontal lines in doorways where I often froze. Something about having that visual cue to step over seams to interrupt the freezing pattern. In my bathroom, I installed contrasting colored grab bars. The contrast helps my brain perceive depth better, making it easier to reach accurately. These environmental changes reduced my daily struggles significantly, and they were so simple to implement. They didn't cure my symptoms, but they made navigating my world much less stressful. I wish I could tell you there's a single technique that works like magic overnight. The reality is that regaining control of movement with Parkinson's requires consistent practice, treating these techniques like physical therapy rather than occasional tricks. When I first learned these methods, I'd use them only when I was having particular difficulty. They helped in the moment, but I wasn't seeing lasting improvement. Everything changed when I committed to daily practice, even on good days. 15 minutes each morning, working on big movements. 10 minutes practicing rhythmic walking after lunch. 5 minutes of dual-tasking exercises before dinner. The neuroplasticity that makes these techniques effective doesn't happen with occasional use. It requires repetition, consistent signals to your brain that these new pathways need to be strengthened and maintained. I created a simple checklist and tracked my practice daily. On days when I completed all my exercises, I'd place a gold star on the calendar, a childish reward system that nonetheless kept me motivated. Within 3 months of this consistent approach, my baseline movement had improved dramatically. The techniques were becoming more automatic, requiring less conscious effort. My bad days were now comparable to what good days had been before. This consistency principle applies to all the techniques I've shared. They work, but only if you practice them regularly enough for your brain to adapt. Let's talk about something that isn't discussed enough: the emotional journey of regaining movement control. Because Parkinson's symptoms fluctuate, progress isn't linear. You'll have good days and bad days, and that emotional roller coaster can be as challenging as the physical symptoms. I remember a particularly difficult period, about 6 months into my practice of these techniques. I'd been making steady progress, and then suddenly had a week of significant regression. My tremor was worse, my gait was shuffling again, and techniques that had been working seemed to fail. I felt devastated, convinced that the disease was winning despite my efforts. My wife found me sitting on the edge of our bed, unwilling to try, getting up because I was so afraid of failure. "This isn't working anymore," I told her. "It's just a bad week," she said. Remember what Dr. Klein told us about fluctuations. She was right. My neurologist had explained that symptoms naturally wax and wane due to numerous factors: stress, sleep quality, medication timing, even weather changes. The techniques weren't failing. My expectations needed adjustment. I learned to view progress in terms of months, not days. To celebrate improvements without becoming demoralized by inevitable setbacks. To recognize that even with these techniques, I would still have difficult moments. This emotional management became as important as the physical techniques themselves. I started keeping a symptom journal, noting not just problems but improvements too. This broader perspective helped me see the overall positive trajectory, despite daily fluctuations. I also found that stress and anxiety significantly worsened my symptoms. Simple mindfulness practices before attempting difficult movements often made them easier. Taking 3 deep breaths before standing up, for instance, or mentally saying, "I can do this," before walking through a doorway. These psychological elements aren't separate from the physical techniques, they're an integral part of them. As I've shared these different techniques, you might be wondering how they all fit together. The most effective approach isn't using one method exclusively. It's building a personalized toolkit and knowing which technique to apply in different situations. For me, that meant creating what I call my movement hierarchy, a decision tree for which strategies to try based on the situation. For walking on good days, I focus on big movements and normal arm swing. For walking when I'm tired, I add rhythmic counting or use my metronome app. For freezing episodes, I use visual imagery of stepping over an object. For complex tasks like getting in and out of a car, I break the movement into counted steps. For social situations where I feel anxious, I use breathing techniques first, then movement strategies. This systematic approach removed the panic I used to feel when symptoms appeared. Instead of thinking, "I can't move," I now think, "Which technique do I need right now?" I keep a small card in my wallet with my hierarchy of techniques as a reminder. My family members know it too, so they can prompt me with the right cue if they see me struggling. The beauty of this approach is that it's customizable. As you discover which techniques work best for your specific symptoms, you can build your own movement strategy. And that strategy will evolve over time. Techniques that work well now might become less effective as the disease progresses, while others might become more important. Flexibility and willingness to adapt are key. When I look back at where I was 5 years ago compared to today, the difference is remarkable. Not because my Parkinson's is cured, it isn't. The disease continues to progress. But my ability to manage it, to maintain movement and independence despite it, has transformed my daily life. The techniques I've shared, cognitive cueing, rhythmic strategies, big movements, dual tasking, environmental modifications, consistent practice, emotional management, and building a comprehensive strategy, have collectively given me back control I thought I'd lost forever. I still have Parkinson's. I still have bad days. But I'm no longer defined by what I can't do. Instead, I focus on what I can do with the right approach. If you're struggling with movement disorders, whether from Parkinson's or another condition, I hope these techniques offer you the same hope and practical help they've given me. Start small. Be consistent. Celebrate small victories. And remember that your brain is remarkably adaptable, even in the face of neurological challenges. Before I was diagnosed, I took movement for granted. Now each step, each gesture, each moment of fluidity feels like a small miracle, not because it happens automatically, but because I've learned how to make it happen despite the obstacles. That's the greatest gift these techniques have given me, not just movement itself, but the knowledge that I still have agency, still have options, still have the capacity to adapt and overcome. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe to our channel for more practical advice on managing Parkinson's symptoms. Leave a comment below about which technique you'd like to try first, or share strategies that have worked for you. And remember, movement is medicine. Practice it daily, celebrate your progress, and never give up on finding new ways to move through this world with dignity and purpose. Thank you for watching How I Regained Control of My Movements. I'll see you in the next video.